It started on a regular day, didn't it? Nothing strange, nothing alarming, just a pause in the rhythm, a message left unread, a call that rang too long. You told yourself it was nothing. They were probably busy, distracted. Maybe they'd reply tomorrow. Maybe they'd call back. Maybe they just needed space. But the days stretched, hours bled into silence. That once familiar voice, gone. That warmth in their words, evaporated like mist under a cruel sun. You checked your phone too much, rewrote every word you sent in your head, wondered if you came on too strong, if you said too much or not enough, if the last thing you said was the wrong thing. You begged your memory for clues, hunted for signs in the past. You asked yourself in the dark, what did I do? You didn't eat right. You didn't sleep right. You stared into screens, trying to find pieces of yourself in the digital grave they left behind. They didn't die. They just disappeared. They ghosted you. And in doing so, they set fire to a part of your soul that believed in connection, in clarity, in closure. You paced your own mind like a prison hallway, replaying every laugh, every smile, every late-night promise as if dissecting it could bring them back. But no matter how many times you went back through the messages, they never answered, not with word, only silent and silent. Oh, silent is a cruel kind of answer, because silence lets your demons speak. It lets the doubts creep in like shadows under the door. It says, you weren't worth a goodbye. It screams, you weren't enough. It whispers that you were disposable, replaceable, forgettable, and you started to believe it, didn't you? Started to believe that maybe you were the problem, that if you were better, quieter, louder, prettier, smarter, they would have stayed, that if you were just more, then they wouldn't have disappeared. But let me tell you something that will burn the truth into your bone. You were not abandoned. You were revealed. Their disappearance didn't mean you were unworthy. It meant they were never worthy of you in the first place. Ghosting is the coward's weapon. It's the act of someone too weak to face what they've done. They don't vanish because you're too much. They vanish because they can't handle what's real. And you were real. You showed up with open hands, honest words, raw soul. You were the storm they couldn't weather, the mirror they couldn't face, the depth they couldn't swim. So they sank into silence, not because you scared them away, but because you exposed the hollowness in their heart. Still, it hurt. Of course it hurt. It cracked you open like a shell and left you bleeding where no one could see. You smiled in public while breaking into private. You laughed at jokes you didn't hear. You pretended not to care. But every unanswered message was a bruise you pressed again and again, just to feel something. People told you to move on, to let it go, but they didn't see what it did to you. They didn't hear how loud silence can scream. They didn't sit in that room alone at night, waiting for a sound that never came. You waited. God, you waited. Not just for their message, but for validation, for closure, for proof that you mattered. And when none came, you started to wonder if you imagined the whole thing, if the love you felt was ever real. But the pain proves it was. The ache in your chest, that's real. That silence that followed their absence, that's real. And you are real. They ghosted you, but they couldn't erase you. You're still here, breathing, standing, bleeding truth while they hide behind their silence like a shield. They thought they could vanish and leave you hollow, but they don't know what kind of storm is born from betrayal. They don't know what rises from the ashes of abandonment. You think this is your end, but it's only your awakening. You think this silence is a grave, but it's a forge. The pain is shaping you. The echo is carving power into your voice. You are not discarded. You are free. You don't need their apology. You don't need their explanation. You don't even need their return, because this story isn't about them anymore. It never was. It's about you, the one left behind, who refuses to stay down. Let them run. Let them hide. Let them haunt themselves with the echo of the one who survived. Let their silence be their curse, because from this moment forward, you're the one who disappears, not out of fear, but out of power, out of the fire of knowing your worth. Out of the storm of rising beyond them, they ghosted you. But now, you vanish into greatness, and they're the ones left haunted by what they lost. There's a game people play, but they don't call it a game. It starts with warmth, smiles, promises, a flood of attention that feels like sunlight after a cold season. You feel seen, heard, like someone finally noticed the fire burning in your chest. They touch your soul with words like silk, and for a moment, you believe. You let your guard down. You start to hope. You build bridges with your vulnerability, thinking they'll cross over and stay. But then just as suddenly, they disappear. No warning, no explanation. Just a void where their presence used to be. And now you're left walking through a house where every light has been turned off, still remembering the way it looked when it was filled with life, still wondering if it was ever real. That's the cruelty of ghosting. It's not just vanishing, it's vanishing after awakening something in you. It's abandoning a garden you helped grow. It's making someone feel wanted, only to leave them starving for closure. Ghosting is a hit and run of the heart. It's walking away from the scene while the other person is still bleeding. It leaves you wrecked, but not in pieces that you can easily gather. No, this wreckage is quiet, invisible. It lives behind your eyes when you smile. It shows up when someone new tries to get close. It whispers when your phone lights up. Don't trust it. They'll leave too. And maybe worst of all, ghosting manipulates you into doing the cruel work for them. Because when they vanish, they don't say, "You're not worthy," but their silence does. It becomes a mirror that shows only your doubts. It makes you ask yourself if you were too much, too needy, too emotional, too open. You start adjusting who you are, bending, breaking, shrinking, trying to become someone who won't be ghosted again. But let me speak the truth they couldn't handle saying. It was never your fault. They left because they didn't have the spine to stay. They didn't ghost you because you were too much. They ghosted you because you were too real. And reality terrifies the people who build their love on illusion. They want connection without commitment, intimacy without honesty. They want all the light you shine without being responsible for what it reveals in them. So instead of facing that mirror, they run. Instead of admitting they're not ready, they disappear. Instead of closing the chapter like a grown soul, they tear out the pages and set them on fire. And you're left with the smoke, breathing in the toxic air of what they left behind, suffocating on questions, choking on memories. But here's the thing, they thought they were escaping. What they didn't know was that their ghosting turned you into something more powerful. Because while they vanished, you stayed. You stood in the silence. You faced the wreckage. You swept up the broken pieces and rebuilt yourself with trembling hands. They thought ghosting made them untouchable. But now they're the ones haunted. Haunted by the sound of your name in conversations, by the scent of your memory in rooms they thought they'd forget you in. Haunted every time someone looks at them with the same hope you once did. And they flinch because they remember. They remember how they disappeared, how they pretended you never mattered. But deep down, they know you did. You were the one who showed up. You were the one who stayed when it got vulnerable. You were the one who dared to feel when they could only fake. And that kind of truth, that kind of raw presence, it never stays gone. It lingers, it haunts, it echoes. And while they walk away with unfinished business, dripping from their heels, you rise with clarity that cuts through lies like glass. They vanished like cowards, but you endured. You became the graveyard keeper of a love they didn't have the courage to bury properly. You mourned what they couldn't even name. You grieved what they refused to face. And in that sacred grief, you found a strength they'll never understand. So now, let them scroll in silence. Let them revisit your profile like it's a shrine. Let them watch your glow-up from the distance they created. Because this game they played, it only proved one thing. They were never the ghost. They were the ghosted. By their own fear, their own weakness, their own inability to love what was real. And you stayed behind. You faced the wreckage, and now you're walking out of the ashes with a fire in your eyes. Let them be haunted. Let them carry the silence now. You've carried it long enough. There's a place worse than being left. It's the place in between, not the moment they ghosted you, but the days, the weeks, the endless nights that followed. That quiet purgatory where you're not loved, not hated, not remembered, just pause, suspended in a silence so loud it drowns your thoughts. You stare at your phone like it holds some kind of magic. Maybe if you wait long enough, the screen will light up. Maybe they'll come back with some excuse, some explanation that will make it all make sense. You tell yourself you won't answer if they do. But deep down, you know you would, just for the closure, just to breathe again, just to stop wondering what the hell happened. Because that's what limbo does. It makes you doubt your own reality. It turns memories into puzzles you can't solve. You remember how they looked at you, like you were the only person in the world. You remember their laugh, their words, the little promises they made in the dark. You replay the good moments like a broken record, hoping one of them will explain the silence. You question every second. Did they mean any of it? Were they ever real? Was I just a distraction, a game, a placeholder, until something better came along? That kind of questioning doesn't just break your heart. It breaks your sense of self. Because when someone disappears without warning, they leave you holding the weight of two people's emotions, yours and theirs. Their guilt becomes your burden. Their silence becomes your responsibility. And in that in-between space, you start bargaining with ghosts. You scroll through old texts, trying to find the moment everything changed. You whisper apologies into the dark that they'll never hear. You turn their absence into a mirror, and all it shows you is everything you think you're not. But let me say what they never did, what they never had the courage to speak. You were never invisible. You were just too real for people pretending to care. You didn't get ghosted because you lacked something. You got ghosted because you brought too much to the table for someone who only came to snack. They couldn't handle your honesty, your depth, your hope, your need for real connection. And so they did the easiest thing a coward can do. They vanished, not because you weren't seen, but because you saw them too clearly. You made them confront things they weren't ready to deal with. You touched a place in them they weren't ready to open, and now you're stuck in the aftermath, not moving forward, not going back, just circling the same old thoughts like a ghost yourself. This limbo, it's a slow death of the soul, because it keeps you hoping while it kills you with silence. It keeps you questioning your worth while they go on like you never existed. But hear me, really hear me. You don't belong in the waiting room of someone else's indecision. You don't deserve to sit in the shadows of what-ifs. You deserve answers, but more than that, you deserve peace. And peace doesn't come from them. It never will. It comes the moment you stop letting someone's cowardice define your value. It comes when you stop trying to understand their silence and start listening to your own voice again. Yes, it's hard. Yes, it hurts. Yes, part of you still wants to believe they'll show up and say all the right thing, but they won't. And even if they did, it would never be enough. Because people who ghost are people who avoid. Avoid accountability, avoid emotion, avoid depth, avoid truth. And you? You are truth. You are depth. You are emotion. You are all the things they couldn't handle, but someone else will honor. So step out of limbo. Stop waiting for a ghost to become human again. They walked away like smoke. Let them drift. You've got solid ground beneath you now, and a fire starting in your chest that no ghost can put out. They left you in the purgatory of their silence, but you're done living like a question mark. You are not the one who disappeared. You are the one who remains. And soon, you'll be the one who rises. Silence is not empty. It's heavy, suffocating. It drips like water in a cave, slow, constant, maddening. Not a roar, not a scream, but a whisper so sharp it cuts deeper than any word ever could. When they ghosted you, they didn't just disappear. They left behind a silence that spoke in riddles, a quiet that clung to you like second skin, and in that silence your confidence started to rot, not all at once, but day by day, little pieces crumbling beneath the weight of not knowing why. You used to feel sure of yourself, maybe not always, but enough. You knew who you were, but now you question your every move. You walk like your steps are too loud. You speak like your words take up too much space. You smile like it might be the wrong expression, because when someone disappears without explanation, you don't just lose them, you lose yourself. You start to believe their silence is your punishment. Their absence becomes proof of your inadequacy, and the shame creeps in. It wraps around your ribs, tightens your lungs, makes you believe you were easy to leave because you were hard to love, and no one sees it. Your friends try, but they don't really understand. They say they weren't worth it anyway. They tell you to move on. They hand you cliches like bandages that don't stick. Your family? They get impatient. They ask, "Why are you still upset?" As if grief runs on a schedule, as if heartbreak sets a timer. But what they don't see is that the pain isn't just heartbreak, it's erasure. It's the unbearable loneliness of feeling like you weren't even worth a goodbye. It's the ache of being made to feel invisible. It's the sting of realizing your love was disposable in someone else's story. And the world keeps turning, laughing, scrolling, celebrating fake love while yours ended without even a whisper. No one notices your silence. No one hears you screaming inside, because your pain wasn't loud enough to trend, wasn't pretty enough to post, wasn't dramatic enough to validate. You were left in quiet devastation, and that quiet, it became a prison. But I see you. I hear that silence, and I know its language. It says, you weren't enough. It says, you're alone. It says, no one cared. And it lies. That silence doesn't belong to you. It belongs to them, to the one who ran, to the one who couldn't face your truth, to the one who disappeared because they were too hollow to hold something real. You wore their silence like a cloak, but it's time to take it off. You didn't deserve the abandonment. You didn't earn the quiet. You didn't ask for the shame. You're not the villain in this story. You're the survivor. You stayed when they fled. You endured what they were too weak to confront. You kept breathing while the weight of silence tried to smother you. You woke up when you had every reason to disappear, too. And maybe the world didn't hear your scream, but you did. And now, it's time to turn it into a roar. Let's stop pretending. Let's stop dressing this wound up in poetry, wrapping it in excuses, calling it bad timing, or mixed signals, or maybe they just weren't ready. Call it what it is. Betrayal, emotional cowardice, a hit and run of the soul. You don't get to disappear from someone you made promises to. You don't get to light fires in someone's heart, then walk away when the heat gets too real. That's not confusion. That's not being overwhelmed. That's weakness masquerading as silence. And they were weak. Weak in the face of your strength. Weak in the presence of your depth. Weak when it came time to be real. And yet, you've carried the guilt. Like maybe you loved too hard. Like maybe you scared them with your honesty. Like maybe you're just too much. Let me tell you something. You weren't too much. They were too little courage, too little emotional maturity, too little capacity to meet you where you stood, bare, open, unafraid. So let's name this wound. Let's tear the bandages off and look at it, because hiding it has only kept it infected. They ghosted you, and that's not something soft or poetic. It's a choice, a cruel, conscious choice to vanish instead of speak, to leave you unraveling instead of offering you closure. That wasn't love. That wasn't kindness. That wasn't protecting your feelings. That was running. And running is not noble. Running is not romantic. Running is not worthy of your forgiveness until it's named for what it is. You have to stop softening the blow to protect their memory. You have to stop writing them a redemption arc they didn't earn. Because every time you downplay the wound, you tell yourself you deserved it. And you didn't. You cared. You showed up. You dared to feel. And for that, they ran. You weren't weak for caring. They were weak for running. That's the truth, and the truth might hurt, but it frees you. Because once you stop romanticizing their silence, you begin to reclaim your voice. Once you stop calling it miscommunication, you reclaim your power. And once you call the wound by its real name, you stop hiding it. You start healing it. Your pain isn't shameful. It's sacred. It proves that your heart still works, that your love was real, that your feelings were alive. You bleed because you were human, because you meant it. And no one can take that from you, not even the ones who ran. So name the wound, feel the fire of its truth, and watch how much lighter you become when you stop carrying the weight of someone else's cowardice like it was ever your burden to bear. There's always a moment when the pain stretches too far, when it stops being sharp and starts being clear, not numb, not over it, but something else, something that feels like awakening. Maybe it was a random Tuesday night, or the fourth time that month you stared at your phone, hoping the screen would light up with their name. Your heart still jumped at every notification, still held its breath every time you saw someone typing, only for it to not be them. But then you stopped, not suddenly, not dramatically, but something inside you snapped. A thread finally broke, a silence inside of you cracked open, and through it, a voice emerged. Yours. You realized they're not coming back, and if they did, they wouldn't be the person you remembered, because that person, they never really existed, not the way you imagined. And that truth hurt. God, it burned, but it also cleansed, because for the first time, you weren't just surviving the pain. You were seeing it. You weren't drowning anymore. You were learning to breathe in the deep. That was the moment, the shift, the snap. You stopped checking your phone, not out of spite, not out of bitterness, but because you finally accepted that silence doesn't need translation. It is the answer. And the only thing left was your reaction to it, and you chose to rise. You looked at the silence and said, "Fine, then I'll become louder than ever." You made a vow, not to get revenge, not to make them regret, but to become, to build, to evolve into something so powerful, so unapologetically real, that even your memories would have to level up just to keep pace. That moment you snapped. That was the death of the old you, the one who waited, the one who begged, the one who clung to ghosts, and in its place, something new was born. Not colder, not harder, just clearer, sharper, untouchable in a way you had never been before. You no longer needed their words to validate your worth. You didn't need their attention to feel seen, because you saw yourself, maybe for the first time, and you realized something terrifying and beautiful. They didn't break you. They revealed you. The pain. It wasn't a prison. It was a mirror, one that showed you every truth you'd been afraid to face, every lie you swallowed to keep someone else comfortable, every time you shrank yourself for the sake of being loved. But not anymore. Now you walk differently. You carry something they couldn't recognize, but that the right ones will never overlook again. You snapped, and no one saw it. Because snapping isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. A breath, a shift in posture, a final look at your reflection before you say, "I'm done waiting for someone to choose me. I already did." And from that moment on, you stopped being haunted and started becoming the thing that haunts. There's a moment when the waiting dies, not with fanfare, not with fireworks, but quietly, like a candle that flickers one last time before the flame gives up and lets the dark in. But this time, the darkness doesn't scare you, because the truth is, you're done. Done replaying memories like they'll rewrite the ending. Done hoping they'll come back and say the words you needed all along. Done standing at a door that's been closed so long, the handle's cold with indifference. This is your turning point. Not just a change of mind, but a change of soul. You no longer crave their return, because you finally realize all they ever gave you was confusion. And what you deserve, what you were born for, is clarity. You're not bitter. You're just done bleeding for people who never brought a bandage. And the wound, it's not open anymore. It's a scar now. Proof you survived something you weren't supposed to. Proof you didn't die in the silence. Proof you were stronger than the abandonment that tried to erase you. So now you stand up. You gather what's left of your dignity, not because it was ever lost, but because you were convinced to question it, and you walk away from the ashes, from the fantasy, from the ghost of someone who was never built to hold something as real as you. And here's the twist. They may have ghosted you, but you became a ghost they'll never forget. You live in the corners of their regrets now, in the pauses between their laughter, in the songs that used to remind you of them, that now remind them of you. They scroll through pictures they don't post. They type out messages they never send. They wonder if maybe, just maybe, you still think about them, but you don't. Not like that. Not anymore. Because you're not stuck in the past. You're not checking your phone. You're not crying into pillows or screaming into the void. You're building. You're healing. You're becoming something they were never ready to meet. And they feel it, even if they don't admit it. They feel the shift. They feel your silence, not like you felt theirs. No, this one echoes. Because yours comes from power, from clarity, from finally knowing who the hell you are. You were never the one who vanished. You were the one who stayed behind and rebuilt the ruin. You were the fire they ran from. And now, you're the flame they can't stop dreaming about. Let them regret. Let them wonder. Let them scroll through old memories, trying to recreate the magic they once held in their hands and didn't know what to do with. Because this is your turning point. The place where pain becomes purpose. Where waiting turns to walking. Where hope turns to self-respect. And where you, yes, you, become the one they can never replace, no matter how many distractions they chase. They ghosted you, but you became a legend in their silence, a shadow they can't shake, a ghost with a name they still whisper in the dark when no one's around to hear. There comes a time when the sadness dries up, and in its place, rage begins to bloom. Not the kind that burns everything down, but the kind that builds, the kind that sharpens you like a blade, the kind that wakes you up at 5 a.m. with fire in your lungs and purpose in your fists. You stop asking, why did they leave me? And you start asking, what am I going to do with all this pain? You take the ache, the unanswered questions, the ghosted messages, the nights you begged the stars for a sign, and you repurpose it. You melt it down. You mold it into action. You hit the gym, not for vanity, but because you need to feel strong again. You need to feel your own power in your bone. You need to sweat out the weakness they projected onto you and carve a version of yourself that would make your old self weep with pride. You start the business or the book or the dream you shelved for someone who barely showed up because you finally realize your obsession wasn't the problem. It was just pointed at the wrong person. Now you're obsessed with your future, with your glow up, with becoming so far beyond who you were when they left you, that if they passed you on the street, they wouldn't even recognize what they lost. And no, it's not revenge. It's rebirth. It's not about making them hurt. It's about making you whole. But still, let's not lie to ourselves. There's a part of you that wants them to see, wants them to watch, from the shadows, from behind a fake smile and a new partner that doesn't come close to you, wants them to scroll through your life and whisper, damn, I really fumbled that. Let them feel the sting of your success, the way you once felt the sting of their silence. Let them choke on the version of you they were never patient enough to witness. You aren't begging anymore. You're building, and every lift, every word, every dollar, every mile is a brick in the empire you're raising from the rubble they left behind. And here's the brutal truth. You were never meant to stay small, but it took heartbreak to remind you of your size. It took their absence to spark your evolution. It took their cowardice to ignite your rage, and your rage to fuel your rise. This is your era of transformation, not polished, not perfect, but powerful, feral, focused, unstoppable. You no longer cry over their text. You no longer beg the universe for closure. You've become your own storm, And storms don't ask for permission to be seen. So let them lurk, let them wonder, let them regret the day they stopped answering, because now you answer to no one. There's something sacred about returning to yourself after the chaos, after the betrayal, after the long nights spent questioning if you were somehow the reason they vanished. There comes a moment where you stop chasing closure and start chasing you. You start to remember who you were before the silence, before you made yourself small to be more understandable, before you dimmed your light so they wouldn't flinch, before you wore masks to keep their comfort intact. You start digging, not into old messages, but into old memories, the ones that existed before them, the ones where your laughter echoed louder, where your dreams weren't confined to someone else's expectations, where you danced without fear of judgment, where your love wasn't an apology in disguise. You find her again, you find him again. That you who was wild, free, soft and strong, before the ghosting made you question your entire worth. And slowly, you reintroduce yourself to yourself. You say, I remember now. I wasn't too much. I wasn't too sensitive. I wasn't a burden. No, I was just too deep for shallow hearts. And that truth tastes bitter, but it sets you free.